Everyone. Happy Thursday. I hope you guys are having a great week so far, enjoying the final days of summer, kind of, if it's summer in your part of the world. So excited to be here today with Mike Thomas. So I first got to meet Mike at Relate Fest back in March. He came with his partner Danielle, and they did a session at my request on attachment theory. I think we definitely talked a little bit about regulation, co-regulation, self-regulation as well. And Mike did a Facebook Live then in the group maybe a month or two ago on attachment theory and healing from trauma. And by popular request, he is back today to talk about self-regulation and co-regulation. So let's bring Mike into the stream. You should see him momentarily. Hey, Mike.
Hi, Leah. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much for welcoming me in here.
It's good to see you. I know you've had a really busy week. I caught you on Sunday to talk about an interesting topic, and you're like, oh my God, I have so much on my plate.
Yeah. Speaking of self-regulation, it's basically the human experience to manage busyness when it comes up, to feel stress, to not realize that your system's stressed and have other symptoms come up like anxiety or digestive issues or tension in the body or dysregulation emotionally. These are all things that come from high stress levels, and it's part of being human. So this is a really rich topic, and I'm really excited to talk about it.
Awesome. Okay, well, guys, if you have any questions for us as we go through this, feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll just dive in. So, Mike, can you define, as you understand it, co-regulation and self-regulation?
Okay, so I'm going to give a little preamble on this first. The concept of regulation is often looked at as something that we do, that we consciously control. And it's very much an unconscious process that happens in the nervous system that after the fact, we can go, okay, what I did there contributed to that. The environment I'm in contributed to that. The people I'm with contributed to that experience. So both self-regulation and co-regulation is the experience of balance, of homeostasis, so that we can be our best. I would say that that's the simplest way to define regulation. Self-regulation happening individually within the person, and co-regulation happening between two people, where they support the best homeostasis of their body's functioning, their mind, their emotions. They're relating to one another by how they affect one another. And this happens unconsciously through body language, which I'll go into more detail about that later. But the gist is, it's an unconscious process of homeostasis individually, self-regulation, and relationally, co-regulation.
Okay, I have two questions.
Yes.
The first is, what are we trying to put into homeostasis? Is it chemicals? Is it like bodily systems like our heart and our blood pumping? What are we trying to get to stasis?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this brings us to a really important topic around regulation in general, and that is achieving a state of safety. This is a mode of the nervous system, otherwise known as social engagement, where our cognitive capacities, our emotional capacity are all optimized because our nervous system perceives that there's no reason to fight or to flee or to shut down. No survival response is necessary. And go ahead.
When you're talking about our nervous system, for people who are like, I've heard the term, but I can't like visualize what you're talking about. What are we like actually talking about in our body?
So the brain, the spinal cord, and all the what are called peripheral nerves that connect to and operate the different parts of our body. That's the nervous system. And the central nervous system is the brain and spinal cord. And there are all these different branches of the nervous system. The one that we're focusing on here in terms of regulation is called the autonomic nervous system, or the ANS. The autonomic nervous system is what it sounds like. It's automatic. It happens without us thinking. And what's happening when we're regulating our systems, when we're creating a state of safety where we can be our best individually and collectively together in a relationship, is that our body is perceiving the environment in a way where it essentially, if I was to give it a voice, it would say, yep, everything's good around here. You know, we can go ahead and be our best and connect and be creative and have fun and play and do what we want to do. There's nothing that's getting in our way. So essentially, when the autonomic nervous system is saying that, metaphorically, of course, we're able to be our best and we can grow, we can learn. By the way, you cannot learn effectively when you're in a survival state. And often people are in a survival state and they don't know it. And so there's a whole topic we could go into another time around learning, not only with children as they develop, but as adults. A lot of times the whole getting entrenched in, okay, I'm an adult and I'm not going to learn anything else. I am how I am and it's not going to change because I'm set in my ways, right? That's a survival response. That's not growing up. That's losing the receptivity and safety and the capacity to learn. So the long and the short of it is the autonomic nervous system is seeking out cues, little subtle cues in the environment, people's body language. Like if I do this with my face, you have a response inside. If I go like this, you might go, oh, he looks scared. You might even feel something inside, like a sense of temperature change or tingling or something. Or, hey, don't do that. Or, hey, do you want to come join me and do this activity together? And I'm smiling. There are different things happening inside, especially when we practice mindfulness and we become more aware of that. And what are we noticing? We're noticing what our nervous system is doing in response to those cues. We're figuring out, am I in regulation right now? Am I in safety? Or am I in dysregulation? Am I in a survival state? And it's so common to not know what's going on that front. That's why I'm so excited to teach about this stuff. Because it drastically changes the playing field of the human experience. We can be so much better. We can enjoy life so much more when we know how to navigate this.
Yes. And I think what's so fascinating is so often we're imprinted for what is safe based on what's familiar from childhood. So even if we grew up in a very chaotic environment, we still feel comfortable and we still feel drawn to experiences that mirror what we had with our parents in childhood or with our caregivers. And that's why oftentimes people can feel very, very drawn, almost like, you know, it's called like a trauma bond, as you know, drawn to these unhealthy relationships because they feel so familiar and comfortable. And our nervous system feels, I imagine, regulated when we're around those people that create that same environment.
That's a great point, because I would clarify that and say that, yes, it's familiar, but it's not necessarily regulated. So when we go into a familiar situation, let's say the trauma bond, where we're in a structured situation with a partner that we feel really magnetically drawn to, often it's really, really intense. And that's usually a sign that there's dysregulation and that there's insecure attachment patterns going on. It's not that we can't experience blissful joy with our partner. It's the extremes of highs and lows that we want to look out for. And those are an indication that we're engaging in dysregulation and maybe we're familiar with it if that's what we're doing.
Super interesting. We'll go into that topic a little bit more as we go, but you said something interesting about regulation being an unconscious activity, like we don't know what's happening. Is that the case for everyone, or are people who are very mindful, is it more of a conscious act, or is it just like universally unconscious?
So when I say conscious versus unconscious, I'm speaking to a proportion of our ability to perceive in any given moment. And I think NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and their teachings have a really effective way of explaining this proportion. They talk about taking in information through our senses. Every second, consciously, we take in 126 bits. For those of you who are into computers and all of that information. A bit is half a computer byte. So 126 bits per second through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting. All of those sensations give us a picture of what's going on in the moment. If I go like this, you hear and you see that I'm clapping, and you go, okay, yeah, I'm perceiving that he's clapping. Maybe he's keeping time. Maybe he's just trying to startle somebody. But I'm going to go ahead and make meaning of that. What's the meaning? Where did that come from? That's the unconscious part that comes through 2 million bits per second.
Okay.
There's so much more coming unconsciously.
Yeah.
About. So, yes, people can become more aware of what's going on, not proportionally, still 126 bits per second. But you can shine your flashlight of attention, I like to call it. So where's my flashlight of attention shining? Within that 2 million. That circle, that flashlight is 126 bits. Maybe I focus in on my sensations, which allows me to navigate a little bit more mindfully what's going on in the moment. Like, okay, hold on. What am I feeling in my body right now? Versus, hey, you did that. That's wrong. That's immediately an interpretation. That's unconscious. That's based on old baggage, the idea of right and wrong. That's not being in, okay, what's going on in my nervous system first? And I can focus there. And then I can go to, okay, so maybe we can do it together. And that's more of a co-regulating experience versus I'm just self-regulating within that experience, and I might alienate you and dysregulate, for example.
Yeah. Mike, just so you know, your audio is a little choppy. I can't tell if it's a Wi-Fi thing or a microphone thing, but if you know of any tweaks, guys, let us know if you're hearing the audio okay. I'm hearing it like okay, but it's not 100% clear. Okay, so I want to go to a group member example. This happened in our community several days ago. It was a bit of a viral post in that it brought up very strong feelings for people as well as the group member. So I'm going to keep it anonymous. Oh, let's see. I think we just got a comment. Okay, someone said audio is clear. Great, thank you. Okay, and maybe you saw this post as well. So I'm gonna summarize it, and I'd like to talk about some of the stories that are going on in the background. So this group member said, I met my mother-in-law for the first time, and she was very physically affectionate with my male partner. It made me feel very uneasy and dysregulated. Okay, this is my interpretation of her unease. She didn't quite go this far in her post. I think I created some stories about what that means. I can't tell if it's normal, but just makes me uncomfortable. I can't tell if it's a sign of their enmeshment. I can't tell if it's a sign of poor boundaries on the part of my mother-in-law or my partner. How could I self-regulate and how could I co-regulate?
So that's a really rich post. There's a lot there. So as far as self-regulation, I would say the most important thing to focus on is what am I sensing physically in my body right now? Focus there. Get away from the content that we might make meaning about. Focus in on the internal experience. Now, here's a little hack that's going on while you do that. Whenever you focus on your mind, meaning, anything in that unconscious realm that we're drawing from our past associations and whatnot, that we navigate with creativity and create some amazing works of art, but we can also create stories that alienate people, right? Mm-hmm. Whenever we focus there, we end up triggering centralized networks in our brain, which are called the default mode network. They're automatically functioning and ready and go into hyperdrive when we're in a fight response. And they get stronger when we think and use our mind rather than be in our body. Whereas when we focus in on the sensations, it shifts the focus of the cortex more to lateralized networks. And it actually starts to calm the nervous system stress response. So just by focusing on sensation in the moment, the letting go of content, meaning, what's right or wrong, any of that stuff that we could interpret, we're starting to calm our nervous system. That's already a process that supports self-regulation. So that self-regulation is that first step of going, okay, what am I feeling? Is my warmth or my chest, or maybe follow in my back, or I'm starting to feel this pressure in the side of my head, or I'm feeling tingling and sort of numbness, or like a more cool feeling in my fingertip compared to the rest of my body. There are things, a concept like heat or cool, and go, which is warmer than the other. Just start noticing sensory information. That act will start to help regulate the nervous system, and it will take you out of that meaning that puts you in your mind and dysregulates you to that centralized network. So that self-regulation is simply by focusing in on the present moment with your sensation. That's the first half of the question. Do you have any questions before I go to co-regulation, or should I jump in?
See, I had never heard it framed that way before. I've heard, a gazillion times the power of somatic processing, but I didn't realize that it takes the focus off what's going on up here in a powerful regulating way. I thought it was like a cognitive process to regulate. I didn't realize that was like in itself, like somatic processing was a somatic process.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
It simplifies the process of regulation tremendously. And what you'll find as you explore this area of skills and awareness is that simple is better. Simple is often the most effective pathway where you want to go. And so often our minds complicate. And so by just getting into our bodies and going, all right, I have meaning and I want to talk about it. And I'm going to set it aside for a second, and I'm just going to breathe, and I'm going to get into my body. I'm going to focus in on my body. And through that process, I calm enough that I start to be able to recognize, oh, wait, some of that stuff that I set aside, some of that doesn't actually make any sense. In my survival response, it totally did.
Okay.
But more calm, I'm realizing half of that story was me making things up that are based on the past. Now, it may take a couple of years of personal growth work to get that kind of insight.
Yeah.
But you get the idea.
What's the recommended amount of time that you would say, okay, let's pause and let's identify the sensations in our body? So recommended time. And then also, are there benefits to like journaling versus just thinking about it? Are there benefits to saying it versus just thinking about it?
Yes. So journaling and speaking about something, you have to remember that if you're speaking to someone, you're going to get a response most likely. And so it's not necessarily as effective as writing. But both versions of expression utilize your hippocampus. That is, you're integrating your memory. You're taking old stuff and you're putting it out there, outside of you. So it doesn't, the metaphor I would like to use, it's not tumbling around in your head anymore. You're getting it out. So yeah, journaling, speaking, maybe a voice note to yourself is probably a more effective way of doing that than saying it right to your partner. Because chances are, if you don't pause for a minute, that's going to be an issue because it will trigger your partner.
So
now,
can I ask you a question? Would you recommend, because one of my questions was, do you recommend doing one first? Like, is it always recommended to self-regulate and then move into co-regulation?
Well, okay, so going back to not necessarily, it depends on the person, but in terms of neurological power, co-regulation is far more powerful. Dr. Sue Johnson, who's an adult attachment researcher, who you and a lot of the audience here may be familiar with, talks about comparing the experience of focusing in on yourself, or even someone who's not an attachment figure, who's helping you, like maybe a therapist that you're not very connected with. Mm-hmm. And neurological power of that, in this metaphor, we can use that as comparable to a 12-watt flashlight or a 20-watt flashlight, something menial.
Yeah.
But the experience of an attachment bond experience where you're interacting with someone else, both positive and negative, is more like the floodlights of a stadium in terms of neurological power. It's not even close. So if you're able to effectively co-regulate together, awesome, do that. But if you're going to trigger each other, it's going to make it way worse.
Okay.
And that, you're probably going to want to focus on self-regulation and get some space.
That's such a great, I like that it depends on the scenario and there's not always kind of a right way or a best way. I'm curious what you think when people share their stories in the group and their experiences are like held and validated and supported. I'm curious what flashlight you think that would be.
Well, honestly, on support and how they experience it. So if they experience someone supporting them as if that person is like an attachment figure. So if somebody reminds them that who's giving them support reminds them of their mother, and their mother was just so nurturing and supportive, and that's the association they have, and that person says something similar, it'll trigger those neural networks from that part of their memory, and it's going to be as powerful as an attachment figure in a positive way. Now, the same thing can go for, for example, I dealt with physical and emotional abuse from my father. If somebody reminds me of my father and they offer me advice I didn't ask for, it's like the bad version of the floodlights of a stadium for me. So it all depends.
Oh my God. Crazy.
Yeah. And so there's a certain level of personal responsibility that we ideally will take. It's not required, of course. People have free will, and they can choose to blame whoever they'd like. And ultimately, what's going on in our own nervous system is something that if we go, okay, that person said something, and I'm really triggered right now. Now, I could focus on how they need to change what they're doing, or I could go, okay, I have an opportunity to learn something here. I could be so much more effective at regulating my own nervous system if I look at this as an opportunity. That's really hard to do, and that takes a lot of practice.
Right. Okay, it's really interesting you said that. I just hit an aha. So one of my most painful relational experiences, and I've shared about this quite a bit in the group, it was a dating experience I had maybe 6 years ago with a guy where there was an intense connection. I wouldn't call it a trauma bond, but chemistry that I would say that I was really enjoying. And I didn't realize this at the time, he reminded me so much of my dad, like his physical stature, certain qualities he had, his sense of humor, like his intellect. And the ghost, it was not a long relationship. It was a couple months. And I'll just add that my dad is like very emotionally aware and consistently fully showing up, present, best dad ever for me. But the experience was like, it was super painful. And it still sticks with me to this day because it felt like my dad ghosted me.
Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. That sounds horrible. Yeah, I'm reminded of an experience I had in high school where a woman, a girl at the time, we were in high school, she connected with me and then ghosted me after about 2 weeks of spending time together. And I was so implicitly open and connected that when that happened, it just rocked my world. I had no idea what to do with that. And I was just devastated. And it took me decades, honestly, to figure out what the hell happened. Why did that affect me so powerfully? And it was a connection you're talking about. Absolutely triggered my mother wound around characteristics that were similar. She was a dancer. My mother was a dancer. She was tall and thin. That my mother had that stature. There are certain mannerisms that she had. So these are really powerful traits that show up based on our past experience. And it's not necessarily going to ever change, but we can learn how to navigate it better.
Yeah. I really like that we went here because I think often there's a perception that an evolved approach to ghosting or just dating in today's age of ghosting is closure comes from within. Just move on, they're not worth it, versus like validating that there's a major attachment experience that can happen with ghosting with certain people.
Yeah, this is eliciting a desire for me to bring up the importance of healing through co-regulation, and how that is ideal if we can do it well. And because the flashlights at the stadium can be horribly devastating or unbelievably empowering, we need to be a little bit discerning about how we approach that, especially with an attachment figure who we're in relationship with, because chances are, if you're a human being and you're fallible, which is everybody, what's going to happen is you're going to create these patterns of rupture in your relationship where you do or say something that your partner has an old trigger from, probably from early development. And a lot of times they don't even recognize that's what's going on. They're just like, that really bothered me. But over time, it builds. And you might say that the neural connection that built from that experience bundles. And then eventually it's this whole cable wire of intermixed neurons of experience that when they do that one little thing, they breathe the wrong way after 10 years of being together, and they touch that wound again. It's so powerful that you're just like, oh, what's wrong with you? And it erupts into this horrible fight because they breathed a particular way after you said something that triggered an old memory that happens to have been re-traumatized over and over again and strengthened as an experience. My whole point in going into this is that it's a really sensitive experience for all of us. And the only way we're going to get to the other side, and I think Derek Hart helped us to understand this in Relate Fest really well, is to get into vulnerability. There's no formula when it comes to this. It's just, in this moment, what am I feeling? And expressing that in a way that doesn't imply any blame, but just goes, here's my heart. This is what's going on. And ideally, your partner sees that and holds that as sacred and goes, I'm so sorry. That experience sounds horribly painful. How can I help? And it doesn't matter what the right or the wrong thing in the conversation is. It's the person is vulnerably expressing. If they're brave enough to do that, please hold it for them. And this is the work that hopefully conscious couples can do individually so that when they come together, they can heal these ruptures. They can start to take apart those cables that are connected to those triggers. And eventually we can release that and replace it with something that's reparative, that's supportive and regulates both of us. And it's so powerful to do it together that these skills are worth doing. It's why I love the concept of humility. I almost wore the shirt that says across the front, "Got humility." And for me, it's just, some people view humility as, like being weak or not standing up for yourself and going, oh, maybe your way is right type of thing, and sort of wishy-washy. I don't see it that way at all. I see humility as the ability to recognize that we have such limited perspectives as human beings, that how in the world could we possibly know everything? And so in the moment when ruptures happen, throw out everything we think we know and let's just get into what we're experiencing with vulnerability. And that's the only way through. It's the only way that we can heal. And it's the most powerful way that we can heal, because ruptures, trauma happens through a lack of support. It's not what happened. It's how the nervous system responded to what happened in the past. And we all have some version of trauma, even though that's not the theme of what we're talking about here. There are all these different versions of that create stress responses that we implicitly in our bodies remember, and they come back up. And so to be able to feel that in the moment and go, I'm in pain, and share that takes a lot of courage. And it takes a lot of humility to, as the partner who's witnessing that, go, all right, I might be really angry at what they're saying or doing, but they're showing me vulnerability. That takes a ton of courage to recognize that moment and then step in and go, what can I do? And it can be as simple as being nonverbal. And in fact, I find the most effective co-regulation techniques involve putting words aside and going, can we just take a moment and embrace and just breathe together. Chest to chest, belly to belly, and just hold each other until you feel the other person relax. That's my absolute favorite co-regulation exercise. And you could be really angry with the person when you start it, but if you commit to holding them and supporting them in that space and just allowing the breathing to naturally synchronize, once that happens, I promise you, you will feel more connected to your partner. It's physiology. And then your mind will not be in the way. You have an opportunity to feel co-regulation rather than, what do I do to co-regulate? Let's be in that space together. Co-regulation happens. And then the thoughts and the emotions and the ability to behave and relate well happens naturally. It's not forced. It's not, how do I figure this out? Throw out all that cognitive stuff. It gets in the way. And once we're connected, then our cognition works better anyway. And we're able to get creative together and find solutions for problems that we may never have thought of, but it requires that connection in the present moment together first.
Yeah. You mentioned courage, and the challenging thing about being dysregulated, it's kind of similar to shame. Like, at least for me, I mean, I imagine people have different responses to being dysregulated. It might be like a fight. But for me, it's definitely a flee. And so it can be, when I am dysregulated, it can be hard to be like courageous and to be seen.
Being seen and being vulnerable is one of the most courageous acts that a human being can engage. Just allowing yourself to be open, especially in this culture. So this brings me to something that I don't know if we're going to have time to completely go into, but we were talking potentially about looking at TRE, tension and trauma releasing exercises.
Oh,
and
yes.
Yeah, so I could briefly take everyone through an exercise for like 5 minutes.
Before we go into it, Mike, I really wanted to do a role play. I wanted to role play the scenario I just shared with the group member's story about the mother-in-law. And could we role play what co-regulation might look like for that
Sure.
group member? Would you rather be her or her partner?
Okay. I'll be your partner.
Okay, I'll be her.
Now, in the role play, we're doing this in an ideal way, or am I going to give you a difficult time first?
Maybe give me a moderate in the middle, like what might be expected.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so how does co-regulation usually start? Is it like, hey, I experienced something the other day. Do you have a sec to talk through it with me?
Yeah, absolutely. What's up?
So it was great meeting your mother-in-law for the first time and seeing you guys together. When I saw her being physically affectionate with you, I noticed that I started to feel some negative sensations in my body. Like I was kind of uncomfortable. And it's hard for me to share this with you, but I felt like it was important to share. I don't know if I can be around the two of you guys when she's that affectionate with you.
Wow. I never thought about it that way before. That certainly isn't how I experienced it. She's just being caring, and that's how she chose it. So pause on the scenario for a second. That's me giving you a difficult time.
Yeah, I got that.
Notice the silence that followed when I defended myself.
Yep.
And I didn't listen to what your experience is.
Yeah, I imagine that's probably super common in the norm to go into defense. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we unpause, come back in, and rewind a little bit, I'll respond a little bit differently.
But I think I should practice responding to the defensiveness.
Ooh, okay, let's go for it.
So maybe I would say, I hear that that's normal for you. But it did make me feel uncomfortable. It was my first time meeting her and seeing you guys together. And yeah, I felt really triggered by it. It's just not what I'm used to, and it doesn't feel normal to me.
Mm. All right. Well, what do you want me to
about? I've been thinking about it, and would you feel comfortable telling your mom that when I'm around the two of you, that there's that she limits the physical affection that she has with you?
I don't know if I feel comfortable talking to her about that, and I think that might make her feel uncomfortable. So then it becomes an issue of whether I make her uncomfortable or you uncomfortable. And that's an unfair position for you to put me in.
Okay, can we pause on the role play?
Yeah, let's pause.
Okay, so first there was like defensiveness, and then there was refusal. And one of the questions I had is like, is laying a boundary a form of self-regulation? Because what she did there, or what I did there, was I tried to lay a boundary.
Yes. So may I analyze a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is where it gets a little tricky. Boundaries involve our own experience. And what we choose to do or not to do. They don't involve controlling what other people do. So it's not actually a boundary anymore. That goes into trying to control other people's behavior.
I see. So I would have needed to say, if I am around you and she wants to be physically affectionate, just so you know, I might go into the other room because I feel more comfortable doing that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And honestly, that way of doing it not only is effective in terms of self-focus and using the boundary within your own behavior, but then he has an opportunity to reflect on, do I want her to walk away every time I see my mother-in-law?
Right.
That's probably not going to work long term. And so he might think about how he can change the scenario and communicate and work it so that there's not this awkward experience of her leaving every time,
Right.
there's affection. So it's actually pretty effective, one way or the other, to focus in on the self that way, even though the survival response is often like, their behavior is uncomfortable. You need, right?
Yeah. What I'm noticing is this is a very like intellectual thought conversation and not like a regulating somatic conversation at all.
Yeah. So that's where setting up agreements in advance is really helpful. So you're familiar with nonviolent communication, yes?
Yeah.
So for those who are not familiar with nonviolent communication, there are 4 steps, and it allows us to stay in the present moment and connected to the heart, to needs and feelings. So observation free from evaluation. So just observing it without making meaning. Feelings free from judgment. So just connecting to feelings without judging whether we should or shouldn't feel. Connecting to what the needs are behind those feelings without strategy. And this is the key piece here in this scenario. If either partner has an agenda around how to meet their own needs or how the other person should meet their needs, they're not connected. Connection happens through connecting to the needs separate from the strategy. I have a need to feel comfort when you can, your mother-in-law, she might say. I have a need for peace. I have a need for feeling connected to you. And I feel less connected to you when I see your mother-in-law being affectionate with you in that way. So the response from him can be connecting to that need, separate from how it should be done. So see how that gets out of the intellectual conversation, and it's more, this is what you're feeling. You're feeling discomfort, and your need is connection.
Yeah.
And so the agreement beforehand can be, if there's disconnection, what can we do So it may not change the behavior necessarily up front, or maybe even ever. But what can happen is when that disconnection happens, you can have an agreement to, hey, after we see your mother and that uncomfortable experience happens, can we take 2 minutes to embrace and breathe together?
Okay,
And
that
that's
makes total sense.
theology, and it creates that in the sensation, in the relational connection experience of co-regulation, so that moving forward, you can start to get creative and see solutions that you may not have seen before. And that's the beautiful thing about being in the present moment and being courageously vulnerable, is there isn't a formula for how all of these things work out. Those individuals will find their solution that works for them both through staying connected as a first step, rather than going into the scenarios that we just role played around how do we fix it, the strategy, right?
Yeah, the first time around was kind of disastrous. I imagine what a lot of couples run into when they're trying to navigate scenarios. Can you just summarize the steps? So the first was expressing the needs, or was there one before that?
Oh, that was the third. So the first is observation. So observing what's happening. Okay, when you see your mother-in-law, you greet her and she's physically affectionate, and I am uncomfortable with that physical affection. That's an observation.
Okay.
So there, notice that there wasn't any meaning around she shouldn't be doing that. It's like, no, I feel uncomfortable.
Right.
And that's what happened. It's factual. That's the first step. Observation, free from evaluation. The second step is feelings free from need. The feeling, I feel uncomfortable. Now, whether she should feel uncomfortable or not is irrelevant. Just connecting to that. So what I'm hearing is you're feeling uncomfortable when that happens. That's the second step. The third step is connecting to the needs. So what's the need that's not being met? Free from how it should be met. Just, okay, I have a need for connection with you. Connected with you. It's possible that there is a trauma history for her that's connected to physical affection outside of the primary bond that was triggering in the past, and that's being elicited. She may not know that consciously. That's possible. We don't need to analyze that. We can just go, I'm feeling uncomfortable. Step 2, step 3, and my need is connected with you. And so the request, which is the fourth step, free from demand, not saying you should or you didn't hug me, like that guilt trip, right? There's no demand in that last step. It's request. Would you be willing to, when that situation comes up, take a moment afterward and embrace with me and breathe with me? So observation free from evaluation, feeling free from judgment, need free from strategy, and request free from demand. Those 4 steps are really helpful in getting into the present moment and parsing through all of that junk that gets in the way of our connection.
I feel like that should be the pinnacle of this conversation. That was super powerful. What I saw in the thread, in the post that I just shared about, was that there were a lot of people taking a stance, and honestly, myself included, on like, is that right? Is that okay? Is it inappropriate or not? Which tends to be not helpful, I think.
Yeah, that conversation will never end, is the problem. That's the vicious cycle of right, wrong, moralistic judgment. Ironically, the conversation itself is not right or wrong, but engaging in it will get a predictable result, which is conflict, which is survival, which is disconnection.
There was a lot of conflict in this post.
I don't doubt it. And let's also remember that absent body language, so being able to see my facial expressions, my gestures, my posture, my tone of voice, my cadence, all of these things are conveying information. The 2 million bits of unconscious information that are filtering in, you're getting that information and your body's processing that, and it's shifting your state. Whereas my words are the 126 bits per second. So what I'm saying is way less important than how.
Yep. It makes total sense. I feel this conversation is going to be a game changer for our community.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for taking time. I know that there were other things we wanted to accomplish, but we can always do a part two.
Okay.
Can you let group members know where and how they can find you?
Sure, absolutely. So you can reach me through my Facebook Messenger. That's one way. You can also email me at holisticfitnesslifestyle@gmail.com. And the same goes for my website. holisticfitnesslifestyle.com is my website. You can reach me through any of those mediums. And you go to YouTube. My channel is called Holistic Fitness Lifestyle. So you can find all sorts of videos on attachment and how to regulate the nervous system based on the specific attachment styles. And that can be really helpful. In some of our examples, I might have added in, someone with more dismissive avoidant patterns, probably going to focus on self-regulation more than co-regulation because it will feel more comfortable at first, for example. And someone who has anxious attachment patterns, they're probably going to prefer a co-regulation experience. And one is not right or wrong, but the long and the short of it is, I'll clarify that in the videos.
It's so fascinating because I asked some of the group members which one feels more comfortable to you, and I'll just read some of the responses. So one group member said, self-regulation here, co-regulation hasn't been accessible to me. It usually just exacerbates the issue because then I need to help them regulate when I can just tend to my own problem and solve it on my own. It's better. Granted, most people drawn to me are a lot more anxious than I am.
Got it.
Another person said, I seem to attract people who need a lot of co-regulation. I miss my ex who was also self-regulating, as I never felt the need to be in regulation mode around her and could just relax. And then there was one in favor of of co-regulation. They said, co-regulation comes naturally to me. It's so relaxing and soothing to my nervous system to be in a partner's presence. Self-regulation is harder for me and requires more intention, to be sure. I'm learning new ways to do it, though. And I imagine attachment style very much figures into preference for co-regulation or self-regulation.
No doubt. And there are ways of working toward co-regulation for those who are not as comfortable with it in a way that's comfortable. So two dismissive avoidant partners, for example, can do something called parallel play, where they're both doing an activity together. Now, they're not facing each other. They're facing the same thing. And so they're doing something together, and there's this feeling of unity that's not overwhelming often for dismissive avoidant attachment pattern people. Eye contact for too long or too much touch sometimes is overwhelming. And so what they can do is something where they're together, but not necessarily overwhelmed. And so that you can play with the degree of how together you are and what's comfortable. You can do a very simple exercise where you stand on either side of the room and pay attention to your belly, your chest, all the internal sensations, and have one person take a step toward the other and just check, what are my sensations? Do I like them there? Do I want them closer? Do I want them further away? And you can literally get a sense of what amount of space you like between you and your partner. And it's probably going to be different than your partner.
Yeah.
Learning to navigate the difference in space is the relational dance, the attachment relational tango, if you will.
I love it. Do you know of any good resources that exist for ideas for self-regulation and co-regulation, like a book or I don't know. I'm just wondering, like, people are going to be like, okay, I want to work on this, but I need to see like a list of options so I can start trying things.
Yes. So Jake Ernst, he has a Facebook page and has amazing resources and tools. He's the one who organized and created the, I forget what he called it. Danielle references this all the time. Nervous system love languages, I believe it is. Regulation love. Yeah, Jake Ernst.
Okay.
Wonderful.
So Jake and then ERNST.
EARNST, I believe.
Okay.
I will find it and make sure I have it right and put it in the comments. And a book that I would recommend that has amazing tools for self-regulation and co-regulation by Dr. Diane Poole Heller. It's called Healing Your Attachment Wounding. And it's just brilliant as far as the visualization techniques where you bring in, archangels, if that's what you want to bring in as a resource, or there are all sorts of these wonderful tools that helps you develop your mind and your body around your relationship to relationship is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Wonderful book.
That's great, because I imagine just like there are healthy regulation strategies, there are some unhealthy ones that people fall into as a way to regulate where there could be healthier options.
Yeah. For example, some people will do addictive patterns as a form of what's called auto-regulation. It'll disconnect them from the pain of not being regulated. It numbs them out.
Yep.
And that's essentially what it's for, is to keep us from feeling pain, whether we're conscious of it or not. But an addictive pattern, for example, like over-exercising, can be created into a healthy pattern by finding a balance of how much allows my body to be healthier while still experiencing the benefit of the dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins that feel so good.
Yeah, it's funny because as you were talking about like learning styles and the environment that we're in that can really impact learning, I often do my best learning when I'm riding my bike while listening to a podcast, probably because my dopamine levels are a little elevated.
Yes.
Anyway, I know you have a hard stop in just a minute. Do you have any current offerings or courses that you wanted to share about?
So I currently have a course online called Relational Regulation Skills. So speaking of the skills that you might want to get, I recommended other people earlier, but my class is actually really helpful for regulating your nervous system, either individually, self-regulation, or collectively co-regulation. And it's on a website called relationflix.com.
Oh, great.
There's a 2-week trial.
Okay, 2-week trial. Can you link it up or send me the link and I'll link it up so people can access it?
You got it.
Okay, amazing. Thank you, Mike. We're so grateful for you. Tell Danielle I say hi. I hope she's good. And you're a group member, so people can find you in the group as well.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on, Leah. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks again, Mike. Bye.
Bye.